Welcome back to another episode of Between Drafts. I'm Nat.
Nathan.
And today we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to do a quick Crypto Confidential update. We're going to talk about Nathan's querying for his book, and then we're going to talk about what I've decided to do for publishing my sci-fi novel. So a lot of fun ground to cover today.
Sweet. Let's start with Crypto Confidential. So if you don't know about crypto, it's going bonkers right now. And Nat had this theory when he originally published the book in July
9th, yeah.
that it would continue to sell well, especially during crypto bull runs. It seems like that has turned out to be true.
That was the hope, especially after it settled down so much from the first 3 weeks. Obviously, we had the launch hype and the couple weeks after that, and sales are very strong. And then it really fell off. It really got slow and was not selling much for the last couple of months. And then when crypto started to take off, so we're filming this November 21st.
Yep.
21st, yeah. And crypto started ripping about 2 weeks ago. And when it started taking off, I started putting out some tweets saying, hey, actually, I posted a tweet first where I said, if you haven't read Crypto Confidential, now's the time. And that was when Bitcoin was at like 80K.
It's now 98.
Yeah. and ETH was at, I think, 2,400 or something. I was like, read it this weekend. And then that was the weekend where stuff really started to pick up. And then on Monday, I sent out a newsletter in my list and to my old crypto list saying, hey, if you haven't read it yet, now's the time. And that was actually that ended up being one of the highest sales days.
Nice.
I think it was the highest sales day since launch week.
That's fantastic.
So that was really cool. Yeah. And it got to number one in the crypto category on Amazon, which was awesome. I think I might have mentioned this briefly last week. It was like me and Michael Lewis up there, which was really cool to see. And it's fallen down a little bit, but it's still maintained a really good ranking. And we just got the numbers for last week, and it was the best week by far since those first couple of launch weeks. So that was really cool to see. It was kind of a validation of the thesis that it might perform with crypto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's up to almost 200 ratings on Amazon, almost 450 on Goodreads, and
350 on Goodreads, right?
Almost 350 on Goodreads. I'm getting ahead of myself. And they're still quite high.
Yeah. Yeah. So over 500 combined reviews. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now the question will be how well it keeps up through the rest of the mania. I'm hoping that as this new batch of people read it, right? Like, I think the original batch of people were my extended audience, and they obviously, a lot of them read it and enjoyed it and talked about it. But now if it's more crypto people reading it and enjoying it, hopefully it has a stronger word of mouth in that community. So I'll be really curious to see how it does from here as this cycle continues.
So how are you thinking about marketing it currently? Is it try to mention a couple times a week in tweets and newsletters? Like, what are you doing differently with this opportunity? Yeah,
now that there's more of a market demand for it, I'm definitely talking about it more and talking about crypto more on Twitter again. And I've been following and kind of involved in crypto the whole time, but nobody really wanted to hear about it outside of crypto the last 2 years. So there wasn't that much reason to talk about it. Now that it's interesting again, I'm talking about it more. And every time I talk about it, that's an opportunity for someone to find the book. I changed my Twitter bio to say author of Crypto Confidential, and then in parentheses, must read for the Crypto Mania. And so I'm hoping that's like a little bit better of a call to action. To just grab it off my Twitter bio. And then mentioned it in the newsletter. I'm starting my crypto newsletter again. So I guess if anyone's interested in that, it's crypto.nataliason.com. And that separate newsletter has 10,000 subscribers on it.
There you go.
So reactivating that, talking about what I'm looking at, what I'm interested in the space right now. Honestly, the biggest problem has been that I have just not been able to focus the last 2 weeks because I've been so pulled back into crypto land. Like, my book progress has noticeably slowed down, which is frustrating, but also
your
exciting.
Sales for Crypto Confidential are up.
True.
So
yeah. But I already got the advance. So,
yes. I mean,
no, it's true. I mean, and this is kind of like a big challenge, I think, with book publishing, with getting books out, is I guess the more of them you get out, or even once you have one out, you're no longer just focused on writing. Now you have to figure out the balance between writing and marketing.
Totally.
And
the incentive for you is you'll start getting royalties once you earn out that initial advance.
Exactly.
And what does that mean, earn out?
So the initial advance was $275. So I have to sell enough books where I would have been paid $275K on the number of books sold. I make somewhere between $300 and $450 per book, depending if it's hardcover, Audible, or Kindle.
Okay, so it's not $275 divided by let's say
$30.
average card is 20.
No.
It's
divided by like $4 or
really.
Yeah. And
Okay,
then international rights play into this as well. So we sold the UK rights for this sounds really low, but this is normal. We sold the UK rights for 10 grand. But that 10 grand goes straight to the advance. So I don't get that check. It goes to paying down the advance. So like that knocked 10K off of it. And then when we sell books in the UK, those royalties also go towards earning out the advance. But in the UK, it's a paperback that sells for £16. So I think I make 10% of that. So I make £1.60 off each book, which is what I guess about £1.60, £1 or $1.80 in the US. So those sales are only having like 1/3 of the impact. And then we're also selling it in India, but I think I make 5 cents per copy sold in India. So that's doing almost nothing. It gets kind of crazy how it like all comes together. But over time, it all really adds up. I mean, we sold the Italian rights a few weeks after publication. And so that'll come out at some point. And then there'll be an Italian version that's paying down the advance. We just sold the Bulgarian rights last week. I actually forgot to announce this. So I'll mention it here first. We just sold the Bulgarian rights. So that's going to get translated as well. And I mean, the selling those rights was $800. So it's not much, but that's kind of the size of the market. And again, if it sells well there, that is more to earning out.
I feel like advances are positioned as almost bonuses that a company would give, but they're more of a loan.
It's really, it's a loan on future earnings that you don't have to pay back.
Yeah.
So it's it's your way of de-risking by giving your book to a publisher.
And it's your future earnings, not the future earnings of yourself and the publisher.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing with that too is, let's say it's going to take 70,000 copies for me to earn out my advance.
I looked if it's average $4 per 68.
Okay. So yeah, call it 68, 70,000 copies. Portfolio is probably in the black at 30,000 copies. Or less, right? So there's actually a number below the number where I earn out where they're still profitable on the book.
Absolutely.
And so even if you don't fully earn it out, your book can still be valuable to the publisher. And hopefully what we're proving here is like, this is kind of cool in the sense that it is cyclical, it is news related in a way that most other news related nonfiction books aren't. Like I had a friend who published a book about Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. And that was very timely, very pegged to that moment, but there might not be the same recurring news cycle about that event the way there could be with crypto. Same thing with the FTX books, right? There were a couple books that came out around FTX's collapse and Sam Bankman-Fried and all of that, Cryptomania, that might not have the same return to interest in a bull market, especially if they were saying that, okay, now crypto's dead, right? So I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. The takeaway is for just writing something in a category that is not only pertinent at that one specific time. Yeah.
Well, and it lends itself to like different ways you can think about nonfiction books, right? Because there are more timeless ones, like history books.
Yeah.
There are ones that are tied to your business, right? Like Tiago's building a second brain. He gets to mention that every time he makes a YouTube video. And if he has 300,000 YouTube subscribers now, he's constantly getting new eyes in front of that idea. And then with this, it's like anytime crypto's in the news, it's an opportunity for this to be like one of the books people recommend to their friends and family who are curious about it.
And for you to very naturally market it.
That too. I actually just got a really nice text from my dad because he has an old friend from law school who lives in Hong Kong and works with some crypto companies. And she read the book just because she was curious. And she really loved it. And now her husband is reading it. And she said that she's actually going to like reread some of the detailed chapters before talking to crypto clients in her business. And that's awesome. Like, it's really cool that it can spread, you know, beyond just like my network to lawyers in Hong Kong who are interested in cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it'll be
That's
cool to see
awesome.
where it goes. We'll have to circle back on it in a couple months in the podcast and see how the sales have changed during this period. But it sounds like your querying has been going well, right?
Yeah, better than I expected. I think I'm slightly traumatized from last time, so I didn't think I would, you know, hear anything for months.
Well, and we talked about this 2 episodes ago now, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
I think last episode was editing,
Yeah.
and then the episode before that, I think, was your querying process. If anyone hasn't listened to that, definitely recommend it. But you started emailing people last week?
Yeah, so I had the query, synopsis, and then first 3 to 5 pages, let's call it, that agents usually want. And I think I said something stupid on the episode where I was querying, but usually agents just want you to literally paste in the pages, which is
really
somewhat crazy.
You don't send it as an attachment?
They don't like attachments. Yeah, and I didn't remember that until I was looking at the submission guidelines and whatnot, and I was like, I forgot about that.
Huh.
So that's a weird thing to mention, but just follow the submission guidelines and you'll be fine. But yeah, so sent out the first batch. I just did 5 queries.
Cool.
I already heard back from one.
That's awesome.
Asked for the full thing, and it's been, I sent it on Friday.
Wow.
So it's been like 5 days.
And they emailed you yesterday, right?
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Compared to last time where it was over 90. And that took, you know, over the span of 5, 6, 7 months.
That's wild.
So that's really promising. I think it speaks to, 1, better writing.
Yeah.
And 2, the platform.
Do you think that the platform is part of?
I think it's a cherry on top.
Yeah.
And so in the query, I have it positioned where start with the book, what it is, what the genre is, how many words it is. Mine's 104,000. And then comparison novels, set the stage. And then 3 brief paragraphs about the plot, the characters, focus on cause and effect and motivation. And then at the end, I talk about the platform, which is newsletter, Twitter, LinkedIn for me. I put that platform stuff at the end because I want the agents to know just from that structure that I am much more interested in what they think of the novel itself.
Yeah.
But I also want someone that values the building of author platforms, because we've done it on Twitter and LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. Once you can do it on one platform, as you know, you kind of learn how to do it on these other ones too.
Totally.
But I don't want somebody who's just like, oh, they have a platform that's going to be great. I want somebody who wants the book also and then sees the platform as like the cherry on top, the differentiator.
Cool.
Yeah. I could just read the query if you think that would be. So it's a little shorter. I went with, it's 293 words, so just below 300.
That's crazy that it's that concise.
It's more, it's copywriting.
Yeah,
it's
it
not,
really is.
I think not writing a book. It's not telling a story. It's copywriting.
That tip that you had from that episode about studying copywriting.
Yeah.
Because selling a 100,000 word book in 300 words is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. It's a completely different skill set.
Yeah.
It doesn't, in my opinion, test at all for your ability to tell a story.
Yeah.
But here we are. And I get why agents do it, right? Because they can't read 10 100,000 word books every day.
Yeah.
That'd be ridiculous. So this is what we got.
I wonder how many books they do read in a year.
I bet it's a lot.
It's got to be a lot.
Yeah. Or at least, read the first 20 pages.
Totally.
Kind of.
It'd be fun to interview some agents about their triage process.
Yeah.
Like once you get a manuscript, how many pages do you give it before you say, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or I could see going to the last few chapters and reading those.
Yeah, that's a good point. Get the setup, see how it pays off, and then decide if you want the middle or not.
Yeah.
Those would be interesting interviews to do.
It would be.
Yeah, but go ahead.
So, okay. So 293 words. Dear agent name, I do add like one line personalization for the agent. So I don't have that in the template.
Would that be like, I saw that you represented?
Something like that.
Okay.
I saw you're interested in books like XYZ. Cool. I saw, things like that. Just to make it a little more personal so they know you're not just blasting, even though you are just blasting. A little more effort. Dear agent name, a little bit of personalization. I'm seeking representation for The Witch Trials, 104,000 words, an adult fantasy novel that combines the darkness and competition of Red Rising with the politics of Poppy War. In a world where magic is rising and technology is falling, 19-year-old Cahill Rhodes has 2 weeks to manifest high magic before he's sent to the Forge, a facility where alchemists are drained of their power to fuel the Empire's machines. As the son of a powerful Archmage Senator, his failure to develop high magic marks him as a stain on his family's legacy. When even having his own father whip him bloody fails to trigger his powers, Cahill grows desperate enough to enter the infamous Witch Trials, a brutal competition where wizards fight for positions within the great houses. But when Cahill discovers the horrifying truth about the Forge's wizard experiments, he must choose between following his father's path of gradual reform or joining his best friend's violent revolution. The Empire's control is slipping as magic grows stronger with each generation, and both sides are willing to spill blood to determine what comes next. The Witch Trials explores how far someone will go to change a broken system and whether it's possible to fight monsters without becoming one. It'll appeal to readers who enjoyed the martial training of the combat codes and the exploration of violence in the Rage of Dragons. And then I transition into platform stuff. I write World Builders, a weekly newsletter about storytelling and writing craft with 89,000 weekly readers, and built an audience of 350,000 plus across LinkedIn and Twitter, where I regularly analyze what makes a great story. I'd be thrilled to share the full manuscript with you. Thank you for your time and consideration, Nathan.
That's great.
So that's it. And I guess I'll look at things I'm specifically trying to accomplish. So with at the very top, I actually think it's pretty important to include the word count. Mm-hmm. We talked about this in the query episode, but they're just looking that you're around the number. And the reason for this is a lot of the cost comes from the length of a book. So if your book is 300,000 words, that's going to be way more costly to print specifically than something that's around 100,000. So just look at whatever genre you're writing, what those ranges are, and do your best to fit within them.
Is it also kind of a sign that you've done your research and understand the industry? Because I get, this is just from Reddit, but I get the sense that often you have these first-time fantasy authors especially who have a 220,000 word manuscript, and they're going, why doesn't anyone want to pick this up? And to what you just said, it seems like there are these very predetermined ranges for first-time authors. And that's almost like the first check that you understand the industry that you're getting into.
100%. Yep. So with the comparisons, I'm trying to pick books that are not outlandish in terms of popularity. So I want to say like The Hunger Games, for example, but also convey. To me, it's both the tone as well as the plot. So when I'm looking at tone, I think Red Rising is very dark. Yeah. And that lends itself to adult fantasy more than new adult or young adult. Totally. So that's one of the reasons I chose that one. Poppy War has crazy politics within it on multiple sides, and that I think is a feature of this book as well. One thing that I really considered comparing it to The Magicians by Lev Grossman. I might actually change the Poppy War to The Magicians just to get across that this does involve magic.
I think you had Magicians in there originally.
I did. I might go back to it.
Yeah.
And so with the actual part of the descriptions of the plot, what I'm trying to do is show there's natural conflict existing in this world. We've plopped a main character down into that. There's lots of stuff going on, but it's conflict There's motivation for him to basically try to avoid whatever the forge is.
Mm-hmm.
I've included just enough detail about the forge that I think people will understand, hey, this is a bad place, and alchemists don't want to go there.
Yeah.
They can avoid it at all. That's what I'm trying to get across. And then it's that kind of flow of cause and effect from there. And then the line where, but when Cahill discovers horrifying truth about the forged wizard experiments, he must choose between following his father's path of gradual reform or joining his best friend's violent revolution. Again, it's just a choice that the character has to make. And I actually don't tell the agent which one he picks.
Yeah.
This is a copywriting thing. That is an open loop that they don't know, that they have to read the synopsis or the full manuscript to figure out. So, intentionally leaving things in like that, I think with this kind of thing is a good thing. I'm not trying to just summarize the plot. And then I back out a little bit and a little bit broader, talk about theme, whether it's possible to fight monsters without becoming one, and then include the platform stuff. You don't have to include, if you don't have a platform, you can write anything that you think will differentiate you. What makes you specifically the person who should write this book? What differentiates you in that way?
I think you mentioned in the episode life experience
Totally.
could fall into there as well. If you were doing sci-fi and you're a nuclear physicist, that would be relevant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you've published short stories, if
you've written on
like
Wattpad or any of those.
Yeah. Yep, so that's it. That's the query. And so far, it's going way better than the last time did.
Yeah,
I'll
super exciting.
Keep updating on the stats and what people think of the manuscript and all that, but I'm gonna keep tweaking it just to see. But yeah, so far promising, and I'll put this in the show notes so people can look at it.
Now that you've gotten a positive response, are you going to reach out to more people?
Yep.
Than the original 5?
100%.
Cool.
Yep.
Probably. And are you just going to send it to the rest of them over the next week? Or are you going to do 5 per week? How are you thinking about that?
I was going to do 5 a week basically until started to see if there were stuff coming back, but it's hard to get a manuscript request is pretty great.
Seems
so
pretty bullish, yeah.
I'll probably send it to a batch of 15 or 20.
Cool. Are there timing considerations?
With the holidays?
Yeah.
If they're open to submission, I'll send it to them.
Cool.
If they're not open to submission, I won't.
Makes sense. Do you know when more fantasy books get purchased by publishers?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I suspect they do the same thing that with nonfiction where they take off the holidays, but then I wonder if there's a big surge in January.
Could
right?
be.
Like, are agents trying to find books right now that they can work with you on some tweaks through December for, so they can send them in January? Like,
yeah, I'm not sure.
That would be another
It's a
interesting
great
thing for us
question.
to look into. Yeah.
We should have an agent on and grill them.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's exciting, dude.
Yeah.
Super
so
exciting.
We'll see how it goes. You have a cool thing to talk about.
I do. Yeah. So this has actually been set for a while, but we've been waiting to announce it and talk about it because I haven't announced it outside of this podcast. But I'm very excited about it. I've told a few people. Figured out how I'm publishing Husk. So ended up deciding.
Which is your sci-fi novel.
Which is my sci-fi novel. Yes. And it's the one that I've been working on that Nathan got the full draft of 2 weeks ago. And I'm actually implementing his feedback this week. So that's been great.
If you get out of crypto.
If I can if I can put down the price charts. Yes. So I actually ended up deciding to self-publish the sci-fi novel, Husk. But I'm doing it in a very high touch, very professional way. So I think the big downside with self-publishing is it does have this perception of being lower effort, lower production value, often lower quality.
Which is a shame because a lot of times authors will actually put in more effort.
Yeah, often the book is quite good.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to produce it at a professional level. 1, because it's hard to get access to the people who can do that, and 2, because it's expensive. And if you go to Amazon and you go to the fantasy or sci-fi or romance categories, you'll see a lot of self-published books. that actually sell just as well as the trad published ones, even though they have these like kind of ugly covers and like, you know, they might have weird formatting issues and all these things.
But that speaks to the quality of the story.
Speaks to the quality of the story, exactly. Yeah, it's something you and I both talked about a lot. If the story is good enough, it naturally spreads and it naturally carries. And so as I was getting closer to getting Husk to a point where I would start doing the querying process like you're doing, I have an agent. So where I would give it,
you would have to,
okay, not that querying process, the sending it to publishers, ended up just deciding I didn't want to do it, you know, for a variety of reasons. One, I've done it once and the slowness is really hard for me. And I think this is the biggest factor, is sending it to the agent, giving them giving him 3 weeks to read it, him to send feedback, me implement it, him to read it again, and then to go shop it to publishers, wait to hear back from them, for them to pick it up. And then even after they pick it up, if they pick it up, could still be looking at another 6, 12, 18 months before it comes out.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to wait that long. I want to be able to move at my own pace, which is a little bit faster in that industry. And two, I think I got kind of lucky with Crypto Confidential in the sense of I loved my editor. We got awesome designers to work on the cover and the interior.
Yeah.
And we made a really cool package that, you know, I just love. And sometimes you don't get that. Sometimes you don't get control of the cover and they put on something you don't like. They might change the title to something you don't like. And I kind of didn't want to roll those dice. And then especially seeing that your portfolio did a lot of things really, really well, but they didn't get as much marketing and PR as I was hoping for with Crypto Confidential. And so almost all of the sales were coming from my network and my audience. And so there's a little bit of, okay, well, if I'm doing all of the marketing myself anyway, then why not just own all the upside and at least try doing it this way?
Yeah.
Because especially having had the trad experience, now I'm kind of curious, like, okay, well, what's the self-pub experience like?
Yeah.
And, you know, there are a lot of upsides on that. You control your timeline, you control all of your rights, you get final say on cover, title, all these things, and you make quite a bit more per book is the other really nice thing. So we were talking at the beginning that with Crypto Confidential, it's anywhere from, call it $300 to $450 per book, best case. With self-pub, you're looking at more like $7. So
almost double.
Yeah. And you can still sell international rights. So that's something that I'm going to look at actually is once I have the manuscript done and I start producing it, and we're going to talk about how I'm producing it in a minute, I'll probably give it to my agent and see if he can get some international rights deals just off the bat, because that's really hard to do self-publishing. Paul Millard, Pathless Path, good work, has talked about this, how he really, really tried to just land international deals on his own and eventually just had to throw in the towel. That's just not how they work. They want an agent to bring it to them.
I didn't realize he had tried to do it himself, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Knowing Paul, that
I think he tried for a year. And
it was selling pretty well at the time.
And it was selling great in the States, and he just couldn't really get through to these international buyers. I think he landed one deal and then he hired an agent to do the international deals, and suddenly they just started coming through. So it seems to matter more in that context. My big hang up with doing self-publishing is having gone through it with Crypto Confidential, it is a lot of work to produce a book and make it look good. And I'm kind of anal about design stuff. I'm not an incredible designer, but I can see it, and it really bothers me when stuff isn't as good as it can be, especially if it's a book that you spent a year working on. And I know I'm not.
The packaging matters so
much. You know, it's so important, and it's really easy to say, oh, well, you just, go on Libby or one of these sites and you just upload your doc, and then it puts it into a book form, and then you upload that to Amazon, and you can do that, but it's not going to look very good. And so I'm actually hiring this company called Scribe, which normally does nonfiction books.
They're very well known for nonfiction.
Very well known for nonfiction. They did
pretty big ones.
Yeah, David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. They did Tiffany Hadish's book. They did
Almanac of Naval,
which actually was written by Eric. who's now the CEO of Scribe. And they went through some drama a couple of years ago. We can link those pieces for anyone who's curious. And the company basically died. And then Eric stepped in and brought it back from the dead. And he's been very interested in having this fiction publishing side of it for a while. The problem is hiring a professional team like this to do your book is expensive. It's going to cost about $28,000, which is a lot of money to invest in producing a book. It's not a lot if the book sells well, right? Because at $7 a book, I only have to sell 4,000 copies to earn back that spend. Not a crazy number if you have some audience, but the number of people who...
That is more than most books sell.
It is. That's true.
Yeah.
Definitely more than most books sell, and feels like an attainable goal given I have a newsletter, I have Twitter, I can do the audience stuff. And even if it doesn't earn that out right away, I can afford to take that financial risk.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is that most people who can afford to take that financial risk are businesses or business people who are doing a businessy book or a book for their audience because they're influencers and stuff. And so the model works better for nonfiction.
It's almost write the book, and then you can say, oh, I wrote the book, and then you get speaking engagements.
Exactly. Yeah. One good speaking engagement from your book might pay you $20,000. And so you've basically paid back the book with one speaking gig. You don't get that as much for fiction. So they've only done a couple of fiction books before, but we were talking about this a little bit. Most of the process is the same. The formatting is the same. The getting it up on Amazon and everywhere else is the same. Producing the audiobook is the same. Copy editing is the same. The things that are different are the cover design, right? So getting somebody who can do a really cool, catchy fiction cover is going to be different from somebody who can do a nonfiction cover. And then the manuscript review. So the big round of feedback that you get usually from the publisher, they do as well with a professional editor on their team who's done this. But again, most of their editors are nonfiction focused. So those are the two things I was worried about going into it. And he assured me that they had somebody who had experience doing fiction manuscript reviews too, who was really good, looked at her credentials and was really impressed. And so I felt good about that. And then they had somebody who had done fiction covers as well. And we actually just have made a lot of progress on the fiction cover, on the book cover this week. And it looks sick.
And they gave you a bunch of options.
Yeah. So we're in that process right now. So the way it's going to work is I told them I wanted to publish end of May next year. So really soon, right? I mean, that's only 7 months away. Plan is to publish end of May. And so I need to get the final-ish manuscript to them beginning of January. I think my due date is January 2nd. And then they'll take 3 weeks to read it. They'll put together all of their manuscript notes and feedback.
So it's not the final. That's the, you feel good about this draft.
Yes, it is the penultimate. It is if they just slapped a cover on it and shipped it out, it wouldn't feel like the end of the world, right? But they'll take that version. They'll do a round of feedback on it with the professional editor, similar to what Portfolio did for Crypto Confidential. They'll send that back to me end of January. I'll have until February 17th to implement their changes and any other changes, and then it'll be locked. And then from February 17th to May 21st is roughly the target date. Then they'll do the formatting and layout and copy editing and all the other stuff, get the audiobook produced, all of those things. So it's happening. Like we're on the timeline now. And it's actually been, it really felt like this huge relief once I decided to do it. Because I think another thing I was having trouble with this whole world and this process is I've been working for myself for, at least in some capacity, for 10, 11 years now.
Yeah.
I've only had one job for 9 months in that period. And that's sort of how I'm used to operating. And it was very hard operating in a space of I need somebody else to give me approval, to let me do this, and kind of taking some of that power back and saying, no, I'm doing it my way and I'm just going to go for it, has been really exciting and really liberating and very energizing. It's made me feel a lot more excited about the book, which is cool. I was excited about it before. Now I'm even more excited about it. And the nice thing too is if the book does well, self-publish, you can always sell it to a publisher after. And this is one thing that I think gets lost sometimes in that decision is, The Martian was self-published first on Andy Weir's blog and then got picked up by a tiny no-name publisher and like didn't do very well there, and then got re-picked up by somebody else a year or two later. Blake Crouch, who wrote Dark Matter, his first book, Run, like that was self-published.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it only just got picked up by a big publisher this year. I think it's coming out now or maybe in January. And so that first one was self-published. Will of the Many. What's his name?
James Islington.
Islinger? Yeah. His first trilogy was self-published.
I didn't know that either.
And I think, or at least the first book was self-published and then it got picked up for trad.
Huh.
It's something like that. It's actually a pretty common arc in fiction, especially now that it's so much easier to do this. And honestly, shout out to Publishing Rodeo podcast, because they had a couple people on who had self-published books, had them do very well, and then gotten deals for high 6 figures, low 7 figures after having self-published it and selling tens of thousands of copies a month. And I don't know, it's like hearing one person has done it and had it work well is very inspiring and energizing. It's kind of like, okay, if they can figure it out, I can probably figure it out too.
I wonder if the advance structure on a deal like that's the same, or if it's truly a bonus and then you just split everything.
It's probably the same.
They do have more leverage. I don't know.
I guess, you could negotiate like a 50-50 profit split or something else.
I mean, if you're selling 4,000 or 5,000 books a month, that's 20, 30K a month. I'd be hard pressed to give that up.
I know. Well, one of the interviews I'm thinking of, the woman she said she was making over 100K a month on Amazon, and then sold the rights for 1.4 million, if I'm remembering right. So
that's only 14 months for what she was doing, though.
Assuming it keeps up.
Assuming it keeps
right.
up.
That is the one. That is the thing. Is like you do risk having a huge hype wave for a couple months and then it falling off.
Absolutely.
So locking in 14 months of earnings, kind of sweet.
Yeah.
So I feel really good about it, dude.
Nice.
Like, it's really exciting, and it feels right. I think there's a lot of it. There's just a lot of things too that it kind of opens the door for that are harder to do with trad. So as an example, a friend of a friend launched a crypto product this week, which called a burner, and it's like a little device that you can preload with some crypto to give to someone to help onboard them. And I think they like plug it into their computer, helps them set up a wallet, and then they've got a little bit of crypto to get started with. It'd be really cool to partner with them and include that with some special copies of Crypto Confidential and sell them on my site or whatever. There's not a great way to do that when I don't control the distribution. But if I had all of the rights and I could do special edition things like that, that would be kind of cool.
I've always thought bundles, even something simple like you buy the paperback or hardback, you get the audio. Yeah,
well, one thing I was thinking of doing for launch, and again, something you couldn't do with trad, but what I'll probably do is do the pre-sales on my site instead of Amazon. And that way I cut out Amazon's cut for the first batch of paperbacks, since they're going to be buying them from me anyway. They don't have to get them from Amazon. And since I'll have all of their info, like their email and stuff, when I send them the physical book, I can also send them the Kindle version.
Yeah. Is there a risk that you won't get reviews?
You won't get verified reviews from those people, but you can still get reviews.
Okay.
Because, if you buy a book in a bookstore, you can still leave a review on Amazon.
Sure.
And it still counts.
Sure.
It looks bad if there's a huge flood of unverified reviews. Amazon might punish you there. But for the most part, you can, as long as the reviews look fairly organic, they're from people who have reviewed other books and things like that.
You're good.
You're good.
What a fun monopoly Amazon has.
I know, right? It's wild.
Oh, you didn't buy from us? Your review's not verified.
Yeah. Well, but also like Goodreads reviews show up on Amazon.
Amazon owns Goodreads.
Exactly. And Goodreads doesn't have a verification process.
Okay. Yeah, fair.
So again, you sell direct through your website or something for this first batch of pre-orders, you have their emails.
Yeah.
When you sell on Amazon, you don't get your customers' emails.
Which is wild.
Which is crazy. Yeah. You can't follow up with them, right? So you could easily follow up with this first batch of buyers a month later and say, hey, if you really loved it, here's this bonus, right? Like, I don't know how much I'll lean on this. I'm going to see where the market is when the book comes out. But there's a lot of cool stuff I can do with like crypto collectibles and NFTs related to it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so much art I could produce related to the book if I team up with somebody really good using Midjourney or whatever to create art for the world.
You see that with fantasy and sci-fi books all the time.
Yeah.
Really cool art that fans will just create for the world.
It's super fun. And, you know, I can send that to people. It makes me very excited for all of these marketing possibilities. And if the book does really well, I can immediately start on number 2. It'll be out within a year, probably year and change. And if it flops, I'm not locked into a 3-book deal in that world.
True.
Right? Like that's kind of a consideration too. You know, sometimes if you're writing a book that's going to be part of a series and a publisher picks it up and then the first book doesn't do well, you're in this weird situation of, do I keep going on this world? Like, what if I want to try a different world? Well, no, you can't, right? So I feel pretty good about it. And yeah, the way we ended up doing the timeline, normally their timeline is 8 months, 7-8 months to do a book. And I asked for 5, with the promise that I would be really quick on getting everything back to them.
Which I think you've proven you can.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were open to kind of that special arrangement, but it meant we could start on the cover now. So even though the book isn't done, we pretty much have the cover locked down, which I'm really excited to share. I might have shared it by the time this podcast comes out. I don't know when I'm going to share it yet, but you know, we can already start doing marketing material related to that. I've got kind of like the vibe for the rest of the media from that. So I'm really excited about it. And I've been really impressed with their team. They've been cool to work with.
Yeah.
So
that's good, because that was your biggest concern.
Yeah. Yeah, naturally, right? It's like you know, I understand how businesses like this work. They have to make money. And so the only way they're making money charging me 28 grand is if they're getting it done for 15 or 20 or something like that. And so can you get the best in the world, or, you know, among the best in the world for those prices? And you can when you're giving them a volume of work and all these things. And the cover designer they paired me with, she's amazing. She's done a bunch of Stephen King's books. She's done a bunch of Jodi Picoult's books. There were a lot of other big names I recognized on her site. And so when they sent me her portfolio, I was super excited. I was like, okay, yeah, this is
and you can
serious.
tell from what she sent there, because there's a talk about this. Sometimes you have to be specific in your contracts with how many covers you'll get and how many revisions on said covers and whatnot. And it seemed you got 5, and then you pick one and you get 5 revisions.
Yeah, you get 5 initial concepts, and then you get 5 revisions on any of the concepts. And each revision comes with like 3 variations within that revision.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So like the ones that I've been sending you are just my favorites within the revision sets. Cool. Like in the most recent one, there was a version without the screen in the center, you know, that we were talking about. So you're getting quite a bit of work, and she's been really quick. And
so in total, you'll get what, 3 times 5, 15?
Yeah,
20?
I will have looked at, call it 30, 40 covers by the end of it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And it's nice too, because everything, I mean, so far everything is tighter. It's faster. That was one challenge working with PRH, was things did feel a little slow sometimes, like getting the next round of cover things back, right? Because I've got to talk to my editor, who has to go talk to the design team, who then has to go start on it. And then, you know, they have to send it back to the editor, back to me. There's just like all of this communication, but me being able to just email the designer directly and us to workshop it.
Yeah.
I was talking to her over email last night at like 5 o'clock while I was, you know, having dinner. So it's like, it's just nice to have that direct line of communication. So off to a really strong start with it. And I'll be really curious to see the manuscript feedback. I think that's going to be the next big question.
Absolutely. And you said that's January?
That'll be January. So my plan right now, I gave you draft 2.1. I finished 2.2 last week and gave that to a couple people. I'm doing 2.3 right now. I'm going to send this to 7 or 8 people tomorrow, because it's getting to the point where all the story stuff I think is quite good. You know, it's really getting close there. And then I'm going to start doing all the prose edits. And maybe we should do an episode at some point just on like doing prose level editing, because there are a lot of chapters that I don't think are going away at this point. You know, like all of Act 3, most of Act 1. There's stuff in Act 2 that we're still unsure on, but I can start making those really good.
Mm-hmm.
And then send it to them in January and probably send another round to people then too. So like I might not send you another full version until then, because I feel like, I mean, one, we got fresh eyes, and we have to like respect each other's time with the number of times we get, like we don't want to get sick of it, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, send it back to like you and Sonia and Cosette and like the people who read this version, and get a big batch of feedback from, call it 10, 15 people, while I'm getting the editor's feedback. And then there'll be a 3-week sprint, end of January to beginning of February, implement all of that. And then.
So what are your concerns with the editor's feedback?
Concerns would be that their feedback isn't helpful.
Fair.
You know, because that's a chunk of what you're paying for, is for this professional to read the book.
Hefty chunk.
Pretty hefty chunk. Yeah. I mean, we talked about it on one of the episodes, but if you go find one of these editors independently and pay them to do a manuscript review, you're usually looking at $5,000 to $10,000. It's expensive, right? And so you really,
and it varies by word count, but we're both over 100K, just over. How long is yours?
106 now.
Okay, yeah. So roughly the same.
I think it'll come in at 105 to 110.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you could easily end up paying $7,000-8,000 for somebody to review that. And so you hope that you get really good feedback for that. Although I guess also it would be nice to just hear like, no, this is great. Ship it. if I believe them, right? Yeah. That's always that's the, I don't know. I'm sure you feel this way too, but with Crypto Confidential on the penultimate draft, I sent it to a few people and they just sent back, this was awesome, I loved it. And there was a little bit of like, did you actually read it?
Are we on American Idol?
Are you just being nice because you're my friend, right? So I'll be curious to see that, but everything besides the cover and the manuscript review, I have extremely high confidence in them being able to do, well, to the point where nobody besides like, somebody as in it as me would be able to tell that this is self-published versus trad published. There are tiny things you can often pick up on that give it away, but 99.9% of readers are never going to notice them. So. I'm excited.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah. I'm really, really jazzed about it. It was very, very exciting, liberating, energizing, like once that decision was made. Mm-hmm. So definitely going to share a lot of updates around that as I go through that process. Yeah.
Great.
How are we doing on time? Oh shit, we're at time.
Right up at it. Anything else with traditional versus self-pub, working with Scribe, going from nonfiction to fiction, anything that you're...
No, I mean, I think the only thing I'd say is like, I had a really good experience doing trad with Crypto Confidential. I wrote an article about how surprised I was by how good the experience was. And so this isn't an indictment of trad, doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just excited to now I'll have both as comparison points. And if I end up hating self-publishing or it goes super poorly and I decide, okay, actually there is all this stuff that I don't want to have to deal with, then probably try to do trad for future novels. Or it'll be awesome and I'll say, okay, actually, I'm just going to do this moving forward. But it'll be really good to have those comparison points. And also, I'm just like, man, I'm excited to be able to get it out in May.
Yeah, that's quick.
May doesn't feel that far away.
No,
May feels really
not.
Near. So I'm pretty jazzed about that.
We should talk more, too, on the difference between nonfiction and fiction at some later episode.
Yeah.
Because you've done both now.
And there's a lot of difference in the editing too. That was the other thing that made me more confident in self-publishing, because with nonfiction editing, there are all these other considerations like fact checking and legal reads, and there's all of that apparatus. But with fiction, it's a lot more of a truly just like one person's mind onto the paper. In the way that you don't need as much of an apparatus around it, in terms of the like editing and checking and things like that. So it does feel a little bit more like it lends itself to self-publishing. And the market for self-published books, I think, is more open to self-publishing in fiction than nonfiction.
Yeah, I don't care less if something was traditional or self-pubbed. If it's good, I'll read
Yeah,
it.
it's a good story. I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
And honestly, some of the best-selling fiction books are self-pub or start as self-pub. So it definitely doesn't hold you back the same way.
Right.
Cool. Any last notes from you as we wrap up? What are you doing before next episode? Like another 5 or 10 outreach probably?
Yeah, I might just do 15 and
Sweet.
start sending them to that top tier as well.
Are you doing more of the manuscript editing as you're going too?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm just working on that as I go and keeping a draft that I'm happy with on the side. So when people request the full, send them whatever the latest full manuscript is and keep editing it at the same time, just make it better and better. And then we'll see how the agent process goes, but early signs are good. And then it's see if we can't, the choice will hopefully there's a choice between traditional and self-pub, but I'm open to both at this time. I just want to see this thing out there.
Cool. That's definitely something I've changed my mind on with Husk versus Crypto Confidential around editing. Where Crypto Confidential, I was doing fewer, bigger drafts where there weren't intermediate ones I could send to people. And now with Husk, I feel like I'm getting it to a new finished point every week or two.
Yeah.
Like 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. And I really like that actually, because you do eventually get to a point where you just say, okay, like these changes aren't happening.
Totally.
So like kind of triaging it as you go and always having a new version that you're happy with.
Yeah. And the way I'm doing it is take what I would categorize as the biggest pieces of feedback, do a new draft incorporating that. Don't try to do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
And then I'll have, whatever the next draft is after editing big piece of feedback 1, and then have that draft, and then edit big piece of feedback 2, have that draft.
Yeah.
And if agents request at the meantime, I feel pretty good about where it is. It doesn't have to be, I think I want it to be as good as possible, but I also don't want to slow myself down.
Totally.
And I think it's in a very good spot.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
All right. We'll be back next week. What should we talk about next week? Should we do the 1 month draft challenge? I know we said we were going to do that this week. We did this instead.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
That's 2 me topics in a row.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. We'll be back next week with something.
Yeah.
So subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube. If you're not watching it on YouTube, there's the newsletter where we share resources from the episode. That's betweendraftspod.com. And Nathan, you're on Twitter at
NathanBall27.
I'm at Nat Eliason, and we'll see you next time.